Today,
Okay.
we are going to undercomplicate the question, how to understand and deal with anger. Welcome to Undercomplicating Stuff, where we, two psychologists and coaches with over 40 years of combined experience, share our insights to help undercomplicate important topics. A friendly reminder that this video is meant for conversational and entertainment purposes only. Please see the information section of this video for additional resources. So I am Dr. Julie Radico. I am a psychologist, a coach, an author, and a speaker.
I'm Dr. Stacey Gideon. I'm a health psychologist and the founder and CEO of a healthcare consulting and professional coaching business. And I'm very excited today because we are going to be highlighting our own Dr. Radico and her forthcoming book, How to Understand and Deal with Anger. So to start us off, what do you think are some of the things that people get wrong or misunderstand about anger?
I think that's a great question. And I'm going to start responding to it in defining what anger is. So, according to the American Psychological Association, anger is an emotion characterized by tension in response to a perceived injustice. So, we might feel devalued, or we might feel like somebody has done us wrong. So, I think a common misunderstanding is that people equate being angry with being aggressive. And those are two different things. Yes, they're interrelated. So you could think about the emotional response as anger, and maybe that then could lead to aggression, but they are not the same thing. You have felt angry in your life because this is a normal human emotion. Everybody experiences anger. And that anger, there have been times when, yes, it might have led to an act of aggression, which is this external expressing of your anger. You might, yell at somebody or throw something or start a fight. Like that's aggression. But there are also times in your life where you've experienced anger and you've just kept it in. Somebody on the outside looking at you would have no idea that you're experiencing anger. Maybe it's in a professional setting or you're around children and you don't want to scare them, where you're just maybe people might say like seething on the inside and nobody on the outside would know. So there's a difference. And people often will say, oh, yeah, they got really angry. And they're talking about aggression. And those two, again, are related, but they're not equivalent. So there are things you might want to do to stop yourself from acting out in an aggressive type of way. However, a goal of never feeling angry in your life is not a realistic or a healthy goal. Because another thing that people get wrong about anger is that it's a bad thing. So anger can be destructive. It can be something that hurts you or your relationships, or anger might lead to aggression where maybe you're yelling at somebody. You yell at somebody who cut you off in traffic. And the heart of anger could be that it's not helpful and it leads to something like aggression or something destructive. However, anger also is really important in spurring us to make change. If we feel like there's an injustice that's been done to ourselves or to somebody else, if we feel like there is this tension because somebody has been injured, whether physically, mentally, like emotionally, and we want to channel that anger into a way where we might stand up and defend that person. So the anger that we feel isn't always just like this disruptive, destructive force. It can actually spur us into doing really positive things.
Such incredibly helpful information and the differentiation between the two, because I agree, in the work that I've done, people really confuse them. I also know that you have talked a lot about intent and how that can play a role. And you have a great example to sort of lay it out for people of how certain things might bother us based on intent that we assume. Could you say more about that?
There's been lots of different research. So in the book, what I tried to do is compile all of the great research that felt really helpful and digestible and applicable into strategies that you can use on an everyday basis. And some of that research really focuses on the fact that our anger comes from the stories that we're telling ourselves. So say you're at the store and you are walking toward the checkout and somebody comes and they get in front of you in line. You might have an automatic thought right then where you are telling yourself a story about the intent that that person had when they did that. you might automatically, not even like trying to, but come up with this story that, oh, wow, this person just wanted to make me feel bad. They wanted to be rude to me. They thought they were more important than me. And that might spur you to feel angry, which might lead to you feel like acting aggressively. You might yell at them or be like, hey, what are you doing? That story that you just told yourself might be true. However, there's just as much possibility that if you don't have factual information to tell you otherwise, that that person got in front of you in line because they didn't see you. Maybe they have an impairment in such a way that they literally didn't see you. Maybe they were all up in their own heads trying to rush around because they've got to get here and there and go these places. And does that make it so that it's still like it's not frustrating to have experienced that? No. But the story that you tell yourself about the intent can really help take the fuel out of the fire of how much you want to let that impact your day. So if you want to, you can hold on to anger for a really long time, especially about things that feel like somewhat small. So there are big things that get us angry, and that's valid. Again, anger is a really helpful, important emotion. There are a lot of small things that we tend to get angry about and we hold on to for longer than is really adaptive or helpful. If I am walking out of that store and I am still feeling really frustrated because that person got in front of me in line, maybe I need to do some work to really coach myself on why is this so sticky? What is making it so this feels so upsetting? Because in the end, I was still able to check out. It delayed me maybe a minute, maybe less. Nobody got hurt. It was fine. But why is it sticking with me? Why is it so frustrating? So, really making sense of what's the story that you're telling yourself and how is that realistic? How is it helpful? And how is it really not helping you?
Such a great example because I know that I am guilty of having had that experience in the checkout line, and it's not a pleasant one. And it's so unnecessary to continue to carry that anger. You've also talked about there's a book that mentions a cow in a parking lot and intent. Can you speak more about that?
There is a book called The Cow in the Parking Lot, and it is one of the resources that I pulled from for this new book of how to understand and deal with anger. And in that book, it talks a lot about intent and this idea that if you were trying to drive down the road and a car is in the middle of the road blocking your way, you might get really angry and assume negative intent about the driver of that car. Conversely, say it was a cow that was in the middle of the road, same spot, blocking you, really still kind of annoying. You don't want to hit this cow, you don't want to hit this car. The assumption that you make about the car and the person versus the cow is likely really helpful for you to remember because you're gonna hopefully, understandably, assume that that cow is not intending to frustrate you. The cow didn't see you coming down the road and go, oh, there's Julie. I want to block her way. It's a cow. The cow is just crossing the road or, in your parking spot or just taking up space. It doesn't know. So, in the same way that you might want to coach yourself to not assume intent, it can be helpful to remember that people oftentimes are not intending to make things more difficult for you. Something might have happened to that person who's in that car in the middle of the road. Maybe they got a flat tire and they spun out and they're hoping nobody hits them as they try to figure out how to get out of the way. They are oftentimes not intending to frustrate you in the same way that a cow is not intending to frustrate you. So just really be mindful of the stories that you're telling yourself about the intent of the person or other people when you're in a situation that's making you angry, because those stories might hit the mark 1% of the time. But even if they do, they're often not telling the complete story of what happened throughout that person's day or journey that made them act in that way. Maybe like this is the 10th bad thing that happened to them today, and they're on their last straw. And it just so happened that you encountered each other in that supermarket, in that road, in that parking lot. And it just was like, oh man, this just didn't work out for anybody today. When that still would be frustrating, but it's not them intending to do you any harm.
I love how useful strategy that is And it's something within our own control that we don't have to have special skills. It really just requires a little bit of practice and being aware of it. And it would be helpful to know more strategies of how to deal with anger. And one thing that you write about in your book is the impact of venting and anger. And I think this will be surprising to a lot of people. Can you explain more about that?
There is research that venting is not helpful to our anger. So you might have heard about rage rooms, places that you can go to like smash plates and destroy things in a safe environment. There is not evidence to support that venting or going to rage rooms is actually helpful. So what it actually turns out to be is that feeding into your anger through aggressive activities actually fuels your anger more. So, what research would tell you to do in response to anger is to engage in de escalating activities. So, things like taking slow, deep breaths. If somebody comes at you and they say, like, you did this, that, and the other, if your first inclination is to yell back at them, you might want to pause. So, you might want to breathe in through your nose, like a move the air to your belly, and then breathe out through your mouth, like a and a moment to de-escalate physically the tension that you're holding in your body. And you also might want to take a moment to say, how do I want to respond? If you're de-escalating, you want to pull out of that automatic response. You want to pull away from the yelling, from the just aggressively or angrily responding, and you want to be more thoughtful in how you're choosing to think about the situation. And I understand that this is hard. This takes practice. What I really hope people are mindful of is the fact that feeding into the anger is not going to help that anger go away. It's really going to keep you stuck in that cycle. And to that point, there has been research done about the reigniting and keeping ourselves stuck in an anger cycle. So Jill Bottle Taylor wrote a book in 2021 talking about a lot of really interesting stuff neurologically that happens with emotions in our brains. But one of the things that she had done studies on and writes about is this 90-second rule. The research that she did shows that the chemicals that get released in your brain when you feel angry. So something happens, you feel angry because there's a chemical response happening in your brain that's saying, feel angry. That lasts about 90 seconds. It resolves itself. Like the chemicals come out and sort of like dissipate within 90 seconds. If you're saying, hold up, wait, when I get angry, I feel angry for hours and I just feel like I'm simmering and I'm angry. What that research says is that that's because you are actively engaging with your anger in such a way that you are reigniting the anger again and again and again. So chemically, what your brain is doing is saying, okay, I feel angry for 90 seconds, like a minute and a half. And what you might be doing, whether you're aware of it or not, is saying, oh, well, I gotta stew on this more. I gotta ruminate. This person cut me out in line at the supermarket, so I gotta just hold on to that anger. And as you do, you're keeping that chemical reaction going in your brain. So you're like re-stimulating it to run, that emotional circuit to run again and again and again. So what do you want to do? Same thing about how venting is not helpful. You want to cut off that feeding into the reaction continuing and continuing. You want to de-escalate. So other ways that you might de-escalate, and this can really come down to what feels self-soothing for you. What are good, healthy behaviors that really resonate with you? And in the book, I talk about a whole bunch of different things that you might consider. So say you want to talk to a friend and you want to really share the story about that frustrating or angering situation. That's okay. Just knowing that a way to talk to that friend in a coping, de-escalating type of way is maybe to talk about the emotions that came up for you and how you want to problem solve the situation or how you want to let go of the frustrator rather than staying stuck in the story and repeating the frustrators again and again and again, because that might keep you stuck in the angry space. So let yourself vent a little bit. We're human. We need to do that. That's okay. Just know that you might be keeping yourself stuck in that anger if you're just venting and not doing anything productive and trying to like de-escalate or move past that frustrator. So, talking to people that you care about, trying to problem solve. So then the scenario of I see something that's wrong in the world, I see an injustice that I want to help advocate to make positive change for. Okay, can you start to plan or build community, find community around that? That the world gives us lots of potential reasons to feel frustrated and angry. And if we just sit in that anger and stew, we can really feel hopeless and down and sad. And there's room for those emotions. There's also really important information your anger is giving you of, hey, I think something's wrong. I feel like there was an injustice here. I feel frustrated. I want us to try to advocate for positive change. That's a way to de-escalate your anger is to say, okay, well, I'm going to turn this into something productive and positive, something that's a force for good in the world.
So, as we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you think people really can take away from today's talk or in your book, which is coming out in August, that would be especially helpful?
Yeah, thank you for that. So the book is scheduled to come out this August 2026, and you can pre-order it now or order it depending on when you're listening to this. So my encouragement would be that people take a moment to really reflect on how does anger show up in their lives? Do a check-in of what tends to make them angry, like what tends to make you angry, and how that anger shows up in your body physically. Are you somebody who, when you get angry, your heart starts to pound? Are you feeling tension in your jaw and your shoulders? Are you furrowing your brow or scowling? Are you somebody who holds anger in such a way that all of those things are showing up? Also, take stock of how you tend to react when you get angry, noticing your own patterns. So, you want to kind of do an inventory of what tends to make you angry. How do you feel that anger? How's that anger showing up for you? And what are you doing in response to that anger? So you might, for example, say, oh, when people cut me off in traffic, I get really angry and I feel red and flushed and I get sweaty and hot and I feel like my teeth are grinding together really hard and that's physically what I feel. And then my response is always to honk my horn and give them the, middle finger and just be really aggressive towards them. Recognize that pattern, collect that data, have a sense of what are the things that really ignite your anger so that you can intentionally plan for what you're going to do differently in any given situation that you know is a frustrator. Because life is going to throw lots of things at us that we aren't expecting that are going to make us angry. And that's really important then to have tools in your toolbox, such as ones that are listed in the book, to respond to any sort of frustrator or angering event. However, if you know that running late in the morning really gets you thrown off for the day and you start to get angry, then being aware of that, having strategies throughout your day that help you plan for that and be prepared. So if you do happen to run into something that you know that makes you really angry, you can recognize, oh yeah, this is something that I know usually makes me really angry, and I'm going to respond in a way that feels healthier for me right now. I'm going to take a slow, deep breath. I'm going to put on some of my favorite music. I am going to think about something else because I know I'll forget about this in 2 minutes if I don't feed into the anger. And also, I know that I intentionally or unintentionally am fueling that anger to keep going as much as I like pay attention to it. So the attention that you give to situations holds a lot of power. And if you want to hold on to the things that make you angry, like a person getting in front of you in line to check out at the supermarket, you can hold on to that anger. A kinder thing to do for yourself is to really let that anger go, especially if it's not serving you in any positive type of way.
Thank you so much for giving all those suggestions as well as giving us an insight into your upcoming book. And I'm going to say the full title, which is How to Understand and Deal with Anger, Everything You Need to Know. And again, it's coming out in August of 2026, and we encourage everybody to check it out.
Thank you. I'm really enjoyed getting to talk about this. And if this topic resonated with you, please share it with somebody that you care about. Also, please comment, like, and subscribe. You can listen to this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. You can also message us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn with suggestions of questions that you'd like us to talk about in future episodes.